All right, let's talk about this Q50 suspension. And I'm sitting in the rear part of the suspension on purpose. Because you know me, if y'all see my videos, I'm gonna give a little history. So for the G37, G35, in the rear, if you have that car, you already know that you had a spring right here, and then you had a separate shock. Then in 2014, with the Q50, they went to the coil-over shock design, coilovers. So your Q50 has stock coilovers. Everybody was like, just throw some coilovers on it. Throw some coilovers on it. It already has coilovers. So it's always funny to me when somebody says that. But anyway, so with 2014 Q50s, they went to the coilover design stock. And then in 2016, they did another suspension update. So in 2016, Q50s have stiffer front and rear sway bars on the stock suspension. And then if you upgrade it to the dynamic digital suspension, which is what I'm gonna really go into in this video, if you upgrade it to that suspension, you actually, along with the stiffer front and rear sway bars, you got stiffer end links and stiffer and better bushings to go along with the dynamic digital suspension. All right, let's talk about the dynamic digital suspension. I don't usually have notes, but I usually memorize them, but life got in the way for this. So the dynamic digital suspension is made by a company called Tenco, and then its sub-brand is Monroe Intelligent Suspension Systems. And as you can, if you ever looked at your shocks, you'll see it's made in Spain. And the Monroe system is called Continuously Variable Semi-Active Suspension, and then the E means electronic controls. So CVSAE. And how it works is there's a continuous adjustment using this valve right here based on a whole lot of different sensors on the car, to control the car's pitch, well, let me say it in order. So to control the car's roll, like you turn in the curve, roll, and then pitch, braking and accelerating, and then bounce. So it's gonna use all the various sensors on the car to keep the car, as flat as possible. And then it does that using its own computer. And it's actually located right here, right behind this, right here. I'll probably show a shot of it so y'all can see. And then for all the systems, this system using a lot of cars, not just Infiniti. Infiniti is just one of many. And so, and the systems usually have a comfort or soft, or you will have, a sport dynamic mode. And even though it's two modes, it still continuously adjusts the shocks, damping, and compression. And basically the difference is that when you're in, comfort mode, the targets of how much body roll it will allow is different from when you're in sport. But on either one, if you're just cruising along, it's gonna soften up. You're just cruising along. But then how much it's gonna resist body roll in sport will be greater than how much it will do and be in comfort. Which that should be self-explanatory. But here's an interesting nugget. So let's talk about the other cars that have this suspension. I hate that I have to do this, but people don't really think stuff is legit, and unless German cars use it. So I hate to do this, but I got to, because I got to show how legit this is, and the only way to do it. Anyway, so this same suspension is on your Audi Q2, Q3, Q4, a little crossover. Okay, y'all like all whatever, it's a crossover. The same suspension is on all the Volvo cars, all your, was it the V60s, S60s, and all their sedans, all the way up to their SUVs are using this same exact suspension. Then your BMW cars are using it. Guess which ones? Your M2, your M3, your 4 Series, 1 Series all have this same suspension. Your Z4 has the suspension. Some of y'all should perk up right now. I said the Z4 has this suspension. Guess who else runs this suspension? The Toyota Supra also runs Monroe CVSAE. And our Infinitis have it on there too. Hopefully that makes this sound legit for y'all. But so for y'all the fans of the Supra, we got the same suspension. Y'all fans of any of the M cars, we got the same suspension. Just wanted to put that out there. Also, I got noted on here, the Jaguar E-Pace runs this same suspension. So, and that's just some of my names. Some of the other manufacturers are not American, so I left them off the list. But I have the link on my, in the description that shows all the different cars it's on. So if you wanted to look and see the other ones I left out, especially if anybody not the United States watching this video, you can see what other car. So like example, a lot of the Renault, if I'm saying that right, cars have this suspension also. But Renault and Nissan, or Renault, however way you say it, and Nissan have a partnership, so a lot of their cars also have this same suspension on it. And in the next segment, I'm going to go in a little more detail on how the suspension actually works. All right, let's go into a little bit more detail of how this suspension works. So, like I said before, this is a semi-active suspension. And then you also have what's called an actually active suspension. So semi-active means that it can't actually add energy to the suspension. Okay, let's simplify that. So if the car is in compression, the shocks can slow down or speed up that compression. If the shocks are in rebound, then these shocks can slow down or speed up the rebound. But it can't stop the rebound or stop the compression. Or an active suspension can actually stop or start a compression or rebound. Like, I don't know if y'all have seen videos of the Bosch system. They showed the Bosch system actually got the car to jump over, just like, old hydraulics, back in the day. But they got, like a mag ride type thing to where they can make the car jump, because they can actually add energy into the suspension. So that's an active suspension. But this is a semi-active, so all this can do is slow down or speed up what's already happening. So the suspension operates on what's called the skyhook theory. So simply put, the whole algorithm is trying to keep the car as flat as possible. The only thing that should be moving on the car is the suspension and wheels should be moving. The car should remain flat. So all the ground, everything can be happening on the ground, but your car should remain flat. And I think I have a good diagram to kind of show what I'm talking about here. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is the damping and compression is controlled by this valve, and it's a current control valve. So more current means the shock's going to be harder. Less current, the shock's going to be softer. And then it has a 10 millisecond reaction time. So every 10 milliseconds is reading all the various sensors on the car to decide if it's going to individually adjust any shock depending on what's going. So like I said, every shock is independent. And then, like I said, the computer is on our car is right behind the passenger side rear wheel. So here's examples of signals that are used to make the calculation or input it into the skyhook theory algorithm. So of course we're using the mode switch. So it's looking at the mode switch. Are you in sport or standard or sport plus? And then it's going to decide, what baseline the shocks or body control target is going to use. So, comfort is going to use one type of have certain targets, and then sport is going to have certain targets. And then it's also using the engine computer, the transmission computer, the ABS, your steering angle sensor, all together. So on the engine computer, I was actually surprised when I was doing my research on this. I expected that it's going to be using the accelerator pedal, but it's also looking at the engine torque signal. I thought that was interesting. And then the RPM of the engine. I was like, what does that got to do with the shocks? But they looking at engine torque signal and the RPM of the engine. And then it even wants to know what gear you're in with the TCM. And then, a lot of people don't know the ABS computer on our cars do a lot. If you've seen some of my other video on the brake limited slip, you'll see how much the ABS computer does and what extends off of it. So I didn't include it on there because I knew I was doing this video later, but the suspension actually is another thing that's extended off of the ABS. And look how much it's pulling from the ABS sensor. Wheel speed sensor, if you're hitting the brakes or not, or you would call it the stop lamp switch. So that's, a lot of people are using the stop lamp switch to disable the VDC and traction control. So what they're actually doing is they're putting an error on the stop lamp switch, and then when you put an error on the stop lamp switch, then ABS can't function because it needs to know when you're pressing the brake. If you have the traction control on, if you have VDC on, it wants to, and then it's also, of course, this is the obvious ones, looking at your yaw rate of the car, and then it's looking at the G sensor or the slip sensor, whatever one you want to call it. And then, it wants to know how you're steering, left or right, so it knows, so if you're steering to the right, it's gonna stiffen up the outside. Well, let's just say whatever way you're steering, it's gonna stiffen up the outside of the suspension. And it does a pretty good job of doing that. And, you'll get into a corner and you think the car is going to lean a little more than it does, and then it doesn't, because it's like it knows you're turning. So let's stiffen up the outside. And it does a very good job of that. All right, so, and then I noted on here that Tenco or Moreau's marketing, they call it they call it the 6 cents for your ride. That's their marketing slogan for its continuously variable semi-active suspension. The 6 cents for your ride. All right, I've given you all the facts on the suspension, so I'll just give you my opinion now. So, I got the Red Sport, and I got the Red Sport mainly because I just wanted the car to have everything. I didn't want to option anything. So I didn't really know much of anything about the suspension. So I was just, I drove the car. The car felt nice. So as far as street driving, back roads, highway, that type of stuff, I think this suspension is set up just great. And I think that's what they were going for anyways. If you saw my video on the, DAS, direct adaptive steering, it's the same type deal where they basically set this car up for the road, and it's very well set up for the road. Well, I wouldn't have no problem taking this car to a road course. When I say, you know, actual road course, and leaving the suspension stock, it would be perfectly fine. It would be able to handle any bumps. It wouldn't get unsettled. You know, if you hit the little curve thing on the track, I'm forgetting what it's called right now. I don't know why. But if you hit that, and that usually kind of unsettles some cars that don't have their suspension set up right, this wouldn't get unsettled at all. And then, you know, if y'all seen some of my other videos, I do a lot of autocrossing because, you know, to me, autocross is a little more fun than a road course, and then it's also cheaper. But going on the autocross though is where I feel the suspension kind of lets you down. You know, autocross is more quick movements with the car, and way more fast paced than a road course. Well, people are like, well, it's a road course, you're going fast. Well, in a road course, yes, you go higher speeds, but the turns, you know, the suspension gets a chance to do stuff in the turns. Whereas on an autocross, I mean, you constantly turning. It's a constantly going left or right with your car the whole time. And that's where you can see that the spring choice that they decided to go with this shock is completely more road course, back road, mountain road oriented, because the car's response when you got getting real quick with autocross, it's not really there. But not saying that it's still not fun to ride autocross with the stock suspension, but especially coming from, you know, comparing it to my G37 that had a full suspension setup on the autocross, my G37 will probably run circles around this car, just based on it having stiffer springs, you know, and basically stiffer everything. And then this car is set up to be a little more on the softer side, but not too soft that you couldn't do it, but it's soft enough that it's noticeable if you ever had a more set up car. So I guess that's my only knock about it. But as far as, you know, on the road or a road course, I wouldn't touch the suspension. So I've been had a lot of comments on my videos. I should do something with the suspension. I should do this. I should add springs, you know, or somebody will tell me I need to get coilovers, and I just shake my head because the car already got coilovers. But the spring thing, everybody keeps telling me to get springs. But I like the way the car handles on the road right now. And I autocross about once a month, and some months I don't get to autocross, you know, family calls. And so I will be really only adding springs just for the car to be better at autocross once a month. And it's like, I don't know. So that's why I haven't done it yet. And maybe I might, you know, break down and just put the springs on there. Or, you know, I catch a deal on some springs and I just say, bump it, and I just buy them, and then I'm end up putting them on. That's kind of what happened with the G37 before I fully did the suspension. I didn't put springs. I autocrossed it with stock springs for probably 2 years before I actually put springs on it. And it was a world of difference in autocross. And I was like, okay, next car, I'm going to have springs on it. But then I drove this suspension, and it's just so good on the road. So I don't know. I maybe do springs to this, and you know, and do not nothing too low, you know, just a moderate 1-inch drop or something like that. You know, I have a steep driveway, and I ain't trying to scrape up everything and have them low life problems. But anyway, I hope y'all learned something about the suspension, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.